Yes, just a second.
So yeah. So hey folks, this is me, Vijay. I'm the host of this show, and trust me, Yasser is one of the most energetic people. And to me, like when I see Yas and other people giving the sessions from the MTT community, it's always an honor to have such kind of people around us who are educating us, who are building us as better developers for the tomorrow's world. Forget the fact that there's going to be AI and everything that's going to change the way in which we are going to be educated. But tomorrow there is going to be a new change and a new revolution that we need to be thinking about. And I think MTT is doing an amazing job in getting us rightly educated for the world of DevOps, this and that. And thank you so much, Yasa. Being on this show means a lot to us.
Thanks, Vishwas. Thank you, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yas, a technical trainer based in Melbourne, Australia, working for Microsoft. And I come from developer background, so everything about development, DevOps, security, all those different stuff. I usually deliver courses in those areas as well. And here today, we're going to talk about containers and many different ways you can run your workloads using containers in Azure. So thanks for inviting me, and let me know when you're ready.
Sure, we are ready now. So yeah, Lakshit, you can make it completely a full screen now. Sure,
All
we are
right,
ready.
thanks. So let's go. Well, we can talk about running workloads regardless of what they are, unless we talk about containers. And gone is past those days when there was an issue in our software and we couldn't get the software running. There was errors all over the place. In order for you to run your software, whether it was a web application or a desktop application or whatever it was, you had to recreate the entire environment sometimes, and there was a lot of trouble. So containers are getting widespread every day, and we know the reason. They're really easy to set up. They're really easy to work with. There's a bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but once you get the hang of it, it's going to make your life a lot easier. And we're here today. We're going to talk about different ways that Azure has offered you a way or a service to run your container, regardless of what type of workloads do you have. We have something for you. So today we're going to categorize our talks in different categories. So we're going to talk about where do you store your container images and basically with the container registry. We then move into platform as a service offerings. We'll talk about services such as web apps or container insights or AKS or Azure Kubernetes services. And then we'll go into a bit more advanced scenarios, such as, for example, Service Fabric or even container apps, which are designed for running a very specific type of scenarios and situations. So let's dive deep into these and see how we go. So starting from where do you store your images? Well, we have a private registry in Azure, which we call Azure Container Registry, or ACR for short. Now, ACR offers quite a few different behind-the-scenes feature that generally you don't get by those public repositories, or even if you're self-hosting. So you got to think about some of the high availability options. So we have geo redundancy for ACR. We have integration with our continuous deployment. So you already have integration with GitHub Actions. You have integration with Azure DevOps. So all of these can really easily work with Azure Container Registry and allow you to push your images. And if you go to a higher pricing tier, you get really more advanced features such as geo-replication, so you can replicate your images in multiple different parts of the world in different data centers. And also you get higher bandwidth for uploading and downloading, plus the fact that you get, for example, virtual network integration and stuff like that. So when do we use container registry? Well, when we want to have a private image repository, we generally go for Azure Container Registry. If you want seamless integration with most of the Azure services, so AKS, ACI, or Azure Container Instances, App Services, Batch, Service Fabric, all of those already have integration with, Azure Container Registry, and that's a really great candidate for working with all of those. You also have the option to leverage the Azure policy on top of Container Registry to enforce all your developers to, for example, perform security audits on top of your pipelines, or even when they're trying to push an image, so that you always have the trusted version of your image published in your image repository. And developer tools integration, so VS Code, all these integrated with that. You have a Visual Studio integration, so a lot of different tools already have integration with ACR, which is really great for that kind of integration and use case. So let's go and have a look at a really quick demo and see how easy it is to work with this service. So what I have here is a small web application. It's nothing but a simple HTML page. So that's it. That's all there is to it. In this HTML page, it's going to be hosted by an Express app. So we have an Express app in Node.js, and we're basically running the application, passing that index. So there's nothing very complex here, very simple and very easy to use web application. I also have a Docker file. For those of you who don't know what Docker file is, Docker file contains the instructions which tell Docker, which is one of the container runtimes, how to build an image using a set of instructions. So here you can see we have a from statement, which specifies what is the base image we want to use for our image. And this, generally speaking, there are many, many different base images. You're going to have to be careful with the sizing when you're choosing your base image. I've chosen the slimmest version of the images here. From here, I'm creating a working directory, copying everything into there, running npm install so that everything in our package, JSON dependencies, which is just Express at this point, it's going to be, for example, basically downloaded. Then I'm creating another base image, and this is generally what we call a multi-stage build. This is to allow you to reduce the size of the resulting image. If you just have this, if you remove these two lines and you have that, your image size is going to be a bit higher because of the result of these operations here. So here you can see that I'm basically getting another base image, and I'm copying stuff from my previous stage, which I've called it build. This is an alias for this base image. And then I'm copying everything into there, running the node with that server.js. And that's all there is to it. So if I want to now basically create my image, all I need to run is docker build, give it a tag name, and run my command. And this is going to build my image. And I'm going to show you the resulting image and the size of it so that you know what's going on. So here, if I just run docker image list, you can see here that I have quite a few different images here. And this is what we just created. This is from a few seconds ago. And this is only 119 megabytes. So really, really lightweight image. And we're going to push this image into our image registry in a second. So these are the layers that will get created when we run our first part of our Docker file up until here. So you can see here we have multi-stage build, and these are the stage 1, and the result is going to be slimmer than the original version, which is 172 megabytes. So I've saved roughly about 60 megabytes just by having this multi-stage build. All right, so that's it. And now if I want to create a new container registry, I can go and run this Azure CLI command. So AZACR create, give it a name, give it a resource group name, and the SKU, which is at the moment standard. Now, this is just a command line. You could do the same in Azure Portal, so it really doesn't matter how do you create this resource. So I've already created and I've already pushed my image into that registry. But if you wanted to create and push your image at the same time, you could use this really great command here, AZACR build, and that will build the image, tag it, and then you can just run. This will push also into your image registry. So let me just bring up our Azure portal. If I come to my demo resource group, I have my container registry here created, and here my repository has my image which I used, and this is the latest tag. I could have multiple tags with different versions if I wanted to, but that's not the point of this course or this talk. We are talking about a place to store our images. So that's how easy it is to just go and create a container registry and push our image into that registry. So now we've got our image. What do we do next? Well, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go talk about where do we host these containers, and how many different places do we have. So the fastest way, and probably the best way for you if you are a new starter to Azure, is to use the container instances. So what is container instances? Well, this is a really simple service which allows you to go and create a version of a single container. Now, when we say a single container, it means that you basically will pass in an image, and that runtime, that Azure Container Instances runtime, will run that image in a platform as a service environment. So these are the first of our platform as a services or PaaS offerings. Now, sometimes you have an application which has some dependencies, and you really don't want to create multiple containers in multiple different runtimes. So you want everything to be on the same, shared infrastructure. And container instances has this concept of container groups, where you can go and create multiple containers into the same environment. And these can be running side by side. They're all running the same on the same runtime, so they all share the same physical capabilities. For example, the CPU, the memory, storage, stuff like that. This also has a really great integration with virtual networks. So really, if you wanted to integrate with that, you can easily integrate this great service into a virtual network. But obviously, that depends on which type of pricing tier you use. Go ahead and check these pricing tiers for all of the resources that we go through today, so that you know which features are available for which of these services. Now, when do we use container instances? Well, if you want to run a single container, that's your choice. That's your go-to. You don't need integration with other services, for example, VNet or some of the other advanced services. You can definitely go with this one. This is the fastest way you can run a container in Azure. If you want to run multiple containers in a group which share the same infrastructure and they are able to talk to each other, but for example, you can lock down part of that group. As an example, you have a web application here and a SQL database here, both running in a container. This exposes a port, for example, 1433. This exposes a port 80. And this one here is not really accessible from outside. But the web one is, and these both work on the same platform. Everything is good to go. And that's the beauty of this service. So it's really the great way for you to create the service and get away with that. Now, I'm not going to do a demo of this because this is very easy to do, very easy to work with. And in fact, if you go and try to create one in Azure, we'll give you a starter image that you can just run by default, and you can see how fast this service is going to run. So let's talk about a bit more advanced scenarios. Well, we also have container support in our Azure App Services, or what we call web apps for containers. What this does is basically gives you the same capabilities of the Azure App Services, but this time, instead of publishing your code, you will use a base image. You will use a container image. And you have the ability to grab that image from a private repository, from a public repository, from, for example, Azure Container Registry, quite a various few different places that you can get that image from. But the best thing is the integration with the DevOps tools that is available through the action center or the deployment center of all of our resources. Now, this one is talking about container instances, but this is the same for our web apps for containers as well. I'm going to show you how to set this up in a second. So what are the use cases if you want to run, how or why or when should we run containers in our Azure web apps? Well, if you want to host containerized apps on Azure, and we wanted to leverage our existing app services, or even leverage some of the features that are on offer with the app services, you can definitely go with this service. If you need auto scaling, if you need built-in load balancing, you can definitely go with Web Apps for Containers. It's a really great way for you to leverage all these different features. If you want to deploy in seconds, so the integration with DevOps, GitHub, Azure Container Registry, Docker Hub, etc., this is already done through the deployment center for you. And if you want high availability, so you can have, for example, multiple versions of your container running, and you have load balancing or application gateway or even front door in front of it, then it's easily doable and really easy to set up. Another great feature of this service is integration with application insights and log analytic workspaces, where it allows you to gather all the logs, not just for the service, but also inside your container, and gather all of those in a central place. So really great way for you to monitor your containers and how they're running in Azure as well. So let's go and do a quick demo. I'm not going to go and do the full demo this time, but let me just bring up our portal again, and I'm going to go through the creation process. So we're going to go and create this web app here. All I've done, let me just zoom in a bit. All I've done is just specifying I want to create a new web application. We have to specify our resource group, so we give it the resource group. We specify the name for this web app, so you already know that the name should be unique. So let's call this, for example, AZ India community, and that should be unique enough. Or we could add some numbers if you wanted to. Here is the magic. Here is what happens when you wanted to publish your container. So you could root code by default, but Docker container makes it that really gives it that edge. Now, what type of operating system do you want to run your container? So we both support containers on Linux and Windows runtime. So let's go with Linux for now. Let's specify your region. So let's say I'm going to choose Australia East. And then what is your plan? What is your app service plan? If you already have one in that region with this OS, it's going to populate it. And you see here, it's already detected and it populated that for me. Next thing is, where do you want to have that image? So where the image is coming from. You can see here you have a few options. So if you have a single container, you could go with that. If you have multiple containers and you want to use Docker Compose, that is also available. That's preview. Whenever we say something is preview, we mean that you shouldn't probably be using it for production purposes, but it's still there. You could go and play with it. Make sure you have everything right. Make sure you know how it works, so that when it goes public, you already know and you're ahead of others. Here you can see some of the integration points. Sorry for that. So we have this quick start image where we provided that for most of our services, so that you don't even have to provide an image. So you can go with the defaults, and that's probably what we use. But you could also go with container registry, you could go with Docker Hub, and you could go with private registry. And the good thing about this is that it's all integrated. So if I choose container registry, it's already bringing my container registry up for me, because it knows that I have that container registry. At the moment, I haven't enabled the admin user for my container registry, so this can't fetch the information from my container registry. That comes back to some of the features in Azure, such as role-based access control and RBAC. But we'll see how this works later on. So if I wanted to use this, what I had to do is, let me just open this up in a new tab. And here I'm going to go into my container registry, come into the access keys, and just enable this admin user. And this will enable a user which is the same name as our user, gives it 2 passwords, so you can have a really good and robust password rotation policy. And then you can go back, and this time it should be fine. So if I switch back to now my GitHub, I need to probably do a bit of a refreshing here. So let's see if I can get around that quickly. If I couldn't, I need to refresh this page. Yeah, definitely I need to refresh. So let's refresh this one. So it can detect that I already enabled the admin user. So that's fine. We're going to go and perform these tasks real quick again. So I'm going to use that, go with Docker. Linux in Australia East. That's my app service plan. And here we go. So you can see already it detects that I have this image. It pre-fills the image name, the tag name. And if I have a startup command, I can also override the default startup command here as well, which is super cool. Monitoring again, you can go with monitoring. You can enable application insights, etc., etc., and you can go ahead and click on create. Now this will create a new web app for container. But while this is happening, let me just go back and show you the already established web app that I pushed earlier based on the default image. And that's really easy to set up. You can see here I have this container. This is inside a container running. And if I have a look at my deployment center here in my app services, you can see here I've got the same sort of config here. So I can say, hey, I want to run this from a container registry. I want to run it from GitHub Actions or Azure Pipelines, etc., etc. What type of container do we have, registry, etc. So all of these is reconfigurable even after you've created your service. Now our web app got created. So if I refresh, and have a look at this new app that we just created. There you go. And here is our app. And there you go. Hello from containers. That was from our container registry from the image that we just pushed in our registry. So how easy is that? I'll leave it to you to figure it out. So let's talk about container apps. This is a new service. It got added to our portfolio of containerization platform recently. This is a great service because it allows you to have the benefit of using AKS, but at the same time, abstracts you from all of those complexities behind the scenes. So it allows you to run different types of workloads in your platform. So you can run, for example, your web applications. And the good thing about that is that it automatically has features such as traffic splitting between multiple revisions of your app. So if you have, for example, a new feature, you can publish that as a new container in the same environment, and that allows you to specify what percentage of the traffic you can route to that new revision. It's very similar to do A/B testing, stuff like that. It's also really great for background processing, for event-driven processing, and microservices structure. So really great. It's got built-in integration with all of the available Kida autoscalers, which are designed for Kubernetes, and a really great integration with Dapper. So really great service that you can go and leverage from. Definitely go check this out. What happens if you want batch processing? Let's say you want to generate a report nightly or bi-nightly or weekly or whatever it is. You need some containers, and these containers should be running in the background, processing some sort of a data processing or whatever it is. Then Azure Batch plus Batch Shipyard is the way for you to go. So really easy to go and leverage multiple different containers that will run the same or get the same input and produce the same output for you. It also has really great integration with these type of dashboards. So you can go and leverage these type of dashboards and figure out what's going on in your processing capabilities, how many containers do you have running, what type of memory is it consuming at the moment, what's your CPU percentage, etc., etc. So really great way for you to sort of monitor what's going on in your background process. When should you use this? Well, if you want big data workloads, this is a great service for you. If you want to generate reports, again, really great service for you. It allows you to run, or process the operations that will result in generating or producing your reports. If you want to run long-running tasks, again, really great service because it allows you to create containers which run for a long period of time, and this will allow you to save some cost. So if imagine you wanted to run this in an app service, it would have cost you a fortune, but with this one, it costs you less. You have more processing units, and this is on demand. So you can scale out, scale in, depending on how many workloads and how many, for example, how much workloads do you have. If you want to do CPU intensive process, again, this is a great service for you. And that brings us to our Azure Service Fabric. So what is Service Fabric? Well, this is where we go into a bit more advanced scenarios. So imagine you have already some services on your on-premises environment. Uh, let's say there were, for example, web applications, and these are .NET applications. You're running them in your on-premises, but now you're moving towards microservices architecture. And for that, you choose Azure Service Fabric, because Azure Service Fabric is one of those tools where it allows you to run microservices architecture even on your on-premises environment. So you can have the lifecycle management of all of your workloads right in your on-premises environment, but manage everything in Azure. So really complex service, and really great set of configuration that is available to you compared to a platform as a service offering such as AKS. But at the same time, it offers you that sort of side by side running of your normal applications. Let's say you have a .NET application, you want to run it in a node in your Service Fabric mesh, but you also want to run a node, for example, in Azure, and you want to run node in any other cloud provider for that matter. So you can mix and match all those different capabilities. It's got great orchestration ability, so you can orchestrate everything centrally. It's got always on availability, so your containers or your workloads are always ready to answer any particular request. There's no idle time or cold starts. It's got really great integration with Azure Monitor for health and monitoring of your workloads. DevOps tooling, all of those different stuff are available. And the most important one, which is similar to container apps or AKS, is the auto scaling. So you can definitely leverage that in the Service Fabric mesh as well. Here is a really simple, I should say, diagram of what can happen if you have Service Fabric in place. So let's say you have your Service Fabric, you can have a load balancer, you can have a VM scale set, which is running your primary node types. You can have different types of node types, or front end, back end, etc., etc. You can integrate it with other Azure services such as external data stores, Cosmos DB, storage accounts, SQL Server, Azure SQL databases, and you also can leverage virtual networks if you want to run this great service. On the side note, you also have integration with, for example, Azure Key Vault to secure your secrets. You have Azure Monitor and Azure Pipelines availability as well there. So really great to run these type of workloads in Azure. When should you use this? Well, if you have applications running in RAS and you just want to lift and shift, well, this is a great place for you to start, because it allows you to just bring an application and run it into Azure without any change. If you want to mix containers and Service Fabric microservices, so you already have a microservice architecture in running your Service Fabric, and now you want to add containers as your new microservice architecture, this is again a great service for you to leverage. If you want to reduce the impact of noisy neighbors, so you might have heard of this term, noisy neighbors. These are applications which generate a lot of noise. They might be, for example, network packets, there might be events that are emitting from a service, or whatever it might be. Really great to reduce the impact of those, so you can shield those nodes, so you can limit, for example, what node can talk to what other node. So really great for those type of situations. And that brings us to AKS, or Azure Kubernetes Service. This is probably the flagship of our services in terms of running containers. This is the Kubernetes Services Azure flavored version, where we have integration with majority of different Azure services such as Container Registry, Azure Policy, Blueprints, a lot of different stuff. And here is an example of what you can do within this, or using this service. So here you can see that there's a developer who's creating a new container image, pushes it into a container registry, and then you can see here that you have that image vulnerability scanning available in that container registry. Through your CI/CD pipeline, you're trying to deploy this into your AKS, but here you have an Azure policy which reinforces that compliance check. So you can't push an image into your AKS cluster unless it's passed the vulnerability scanning. And if it's passed, then it gets deployed. If it's not, it basically goes back for somebody to action upon and resolve those issues. So really great in those situations. We have 42 regions and counting support on AKS, so it's not available on all the Azure regions, but it's coming. So it's one of those services where it's getting really, really widespread, really, really fast. So when do you use AKS? Well, if you want to use lift and shift containers to AKS, that's a really great service. So lift and shift of IaaS applications, Service Fabric Mesh, If you have already containers and you want to lift and shift it to Azure, then AKS is probably the best place to go because it comes with a lot of really great services or offerings or features in terms of being a platform as a service or a managed service, but also gives you a really great flexibility to control how your containers are running, how they are being exposed or being restricted from external access. It simplifies the configuration and management of microservices based applications. So it allows you to deploy hundreds and hundreds of containers. You can scale them out, scale them in, however you want to work with those. It comes with built-in integration with load balancers and a whole bunch of different tools, and it brings the DevOps and Kubernetes together for you. So really great if you want to leverage that. Ease of scaling. So we talked about this. There are two modes of scaling that are available. The default is the Kubernetes scaler or Kira scalers. And the second mode is what we call a virtual node. And that basically uses a container inside service as a backup to create new pods and run new containers within a different service if the capacity of your AKS is already full, but you still need more containers. Great for data streaming, so you can stream data across your containers or from multiple containers into your other streaming services. And that brings us to Azure Arc, which basically is not a service to run containers on by itself, but it helps you to run workloads in multiple different places and centrally manage them in a central place. So here you can see you have quite a few different various services running on not just your on-premises environment, but on your edge devices. These could be IoT devices, your, for example, transport system, your satellite, services, etc., or even in other cloud providers. So on your AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle, whatever it might be. And then you can manage all of those centrally from Azure. And that gives you a really great insight as to what's going on in your environment. And Azure Arc has a great integration with majority of these services as well. So when do we use Azure Arc? Well, if you want to manage multiple sites running Kubernetes, for example, through a centralized management system, you can definitely use Azure Arc. If you want to ensure consistent deployment and configurations of nodes and clusters, again, this is your go-to. Regulatory requirements also can be done using this service. So what happens if you want to use AKS, but you want to run it on premises? Well, we also have a solution for it. Because we have gotten our AKS from an open source tool, we also have open sourced our AKS engine. So we have contributed that back to the community. So you can go and get the AKS engine and run it on your on-premises environment. It's just as if you're running your AKS in Azure, but you have to manage the physical infrastructure and visual infrastructure, hosts, and everything yourself, but you easily can set it up and leverage those already great features of our AKS service. So here is an example of running, for example, two different clusters using the AKS engine, and those can be running, for example, on top of Azure Stack Hub, where you have multiple nodes running, and you can leverage, for example, Traffic Manager if you want to route traffic between multiple different clusters to have that great ability or multi-region support for disaster recovery features as well. So really great. These also provide you with integration with Azure Monitor, integration with your DevOps pipeline. So really great sort of integrations that came with all those different tools is available on this one as well. When do we use this? Well, if you need AKS features, but you're running containers anywhere but Azure, this is a place for you to get started. If you want to run or manage Kubernetes clusters on Azure or Stack Hub, again, this is a great service. And let's wrap up. So we're officially finished. I've got a few questions that you could go and find the answer to. What is the fastest way of running a container in Azure, which gives you ability to connect to your on-premises services through hybrid connection? So which one of these is ability or helps you to run your containers in Azure, but allows you to connect your container to your on-premises services through a hybrid connection? And question number two, or quiz number two is, what two services allow you to automatically scale based on its workload. So I can send you answers, comment wherever the stream is available, and we'll pick up the winner and announce afterwards. Hopefully, with the promise, I'm not promising anything, but there might be some stickers or whatever available. So we'll see how it goes. Even if there wasn't, you still have the chance to redeem your knowledge on how to run containers on Azure. So what next? Well, there are many different paths that you can take when it comes to working with Azure. You can go and become an Azure developer. For example, go and sit the developer associate course, AZ 204. From there, you could become a solution architect, or you could even become a DevOps engineer expert, which you have to pass in the AZ 400, which is the DevOps course. But once you've done that, you already have placed yourself strategically within not just your organization, but also outside in the community. So definitely go and leverage these different paths, learning paths, and we'll be delighted to have you in one of our classes if you wanted to join our classes. And here's how to stay in touch with me. So Yasin's on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and that's my website where I publish technical contents here and there on my own website. So thank you so much for being with me for this session. It's been a delight to present this session for the Azure India community, and I hope to see you again in future.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining in. It was really a good experience to host you, and I hope we will be hosting you for further more sessions, and you will be inviting me some more for such more knowledgeable insights and on some basic core concepts. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Okay, thank you, sir. Uh, sir, one of the student is asking about the slides. If you can share the link or something like that.
I will publish the link to the slides. I'll send it to Wishwas, and you could just share with the community. Yeah, I will definitely publish a link to the slides later.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you,
Hey
sir.
everybody, thank you so much. A lot of times, when we do a lot of sessions, I just had a technical glitch right now and I had to just take care of that. And thank you so much. Yes, sir. I think there are a lot of questions from other participants. I think you can answer that as well. So,
So,
yeah, I
if
think
you
in the
have time, you
comment
can just
section,
address them.
there is a lot of
Yeah,
questions to be
sure.
Uh,
answered.
Let's go to the questions. Okay, so how to optimize the cost without the resources that are using containers? Well, there are many different ways in terms of cost optimization. My best recommendation for you is to check the Azure cost recommendations. We have great insights in there. Let me showcase that to you once more. So let me just share my screen again. What are we sharing here? We are sharing this screen. Yeah, okay. So all of these services, if you come to the cost section, where is your, oh, sorry, not here. You have to go back into your resource group. And here, the cost management on your resource group or subscription, they're really great recommendations that we offer depending on what type of workload you're running. At the moment, I have everything basic setup, so there's no recommendations for me, but here is the great place for you to get started. There are a lot of different ways you could set up budgets, you could set up cost analysis, and there are many different white papers that are available on Azure, which helps you to sort of set up an optimum workload architecture for your containers, and also mix workloads. So if you have containers and non-container workloads, you can mix and match as well. So a lot of that as well. So next question here, which is the novel option for the services to be run? I would say AKS is probably the most demanding service at the moment, but Azure Container Apps and Web Apps for Container are also not far behind. DDoS and all the other attacks. So Rajesh, that question is a great question. There are many different services. So most of our platform as a service offerings come with built-in firewall. So for example, if I come and have a look at my services here, for example, this web app is running a container, but I can come and come into this networking section and enable the built-in firewall. So what do I want to do? I want to restrict the access. I want to assign a IP address. I want to integrate this with my virtual network. What do I want to do? And also, apart from that, you can also leverage, for example, other features such as your front door. So Azure front door, application gateway. So Azure front door is a really great service which covers majority of the web app. So if you have an application, regardless of whether it's running on in a container or not, this service is really great. We also have the mixture of Azure App Gateway and the Web Application Firewall, or WAF. This also is a great service that you could use to sort of get around all of those different web attacks and protect not just your container workloads, but any other type of workloads. So hopefully that has answered your question. How is the observability taken care with this kind of application? Well, as I said, integration with Azure Monitor is really great. So all of our services already have integration with Azure Monitor. If I come back to my web app, for example, here I can see my monitoring section. I can see the metrics. So how is my container running? I can see the logs that are emitting from my container. I can configure what type of logs do I want to get. So that's the most important thing. And majority of the services already have these kind of setups. And if you already have application inside, you can also use this one. And this is a great way for you to leverage and monitor app services. If you're running app services, definitely you can run containers in Azure Functions as well. I didn't mention it because it's not really designed to run application workloads, but mainly function as a container. So that's sort of set up. With that, what's your view about the policy and governance as code? Yeah, definitely. If you have that, so we talked about blueprints, and there are many different ways you could do that. We also have great tools such as Azure Arc templates, Azure Bicep, all of those in accordance with blueprints, Azure policy, RBAC, directory roles, and also the mixture of all of those will give you a really great governance. So if you want to find out more, sit on one of our AZ-104 or even 305 classes. Those are really great to find out more about this topic. How is the containers more effective than the serverless? Well, you can't say they are more effective than the serverless, but think of it as this way. Because you're running your application in a container, they give you more flexibility. So with serverless, if you want to run your application, you're going to have to go and, for example, run your code majority of the time. There are some serverless features like Azure Function, which allows you to run containers. You run your functions in a container, but majority of the time you have to run code. And then when you run code, you have to manage all of the different, for example, features. If the code fails, you're getting failure from your function or from your service, versus with containers, you have really great flexibility. You have failure recovery, you have automatic restart policies, whole heaps of different stuff which helps you in that area. So you can't say one is superior to the other. The different use cases will drive you towards one or the other. How to use access control and make the deployment easier? Well, I showed you a great way, which basically was to use. So when we wanted to integrate our container registry, we went and enabled the access keys. But that's not the only way. What you can do is you can come here into this app and come and into the identity section. You can enable the manage identity here. So I can enable this managed identity, and this will give me a managed identity that I can use in combination with Azure Arc. So now if I come back to my container registry, I can come to the IAM section. I can do a role assignment. I can say my, for example, ACR pull. So I want to allow my web app to pull images from this, and then I can select manager identity, automatically detects my manager identity in my app services. So I need to wait for a bit for this. There you go. It's still not there, so it takes a bit of a time. But once I have that, I can select this, assign this, and now my application can pull images from the ACR without any, uh, for example, without this admin key or whatever. So it basically is seamless integration of these two services. And you also have that for majority of different services as well. Kubernetes and containers are lift and shift functionality different when we consider a service that is existing. Well, depends on your situation. If your service is mainly applications running in RIS or Apache web servers or whatever else, then probably AKS is not the place for you to get started. Probably Service Mesh or even app services is probably more proper. But if you already have container running on your on-premises, AKS is probably the best place for you to move and lift and shift your containers into Azure, because you have more control compared to a platform as a service such as web apps or even container instances. So that gives you a bit more flexibility. And there's a last question here. What advice you'll give to one who is just getting started with cloud? Well, be patient. There are many, many different concepts. No one knows cloud, from top to bottom. This is a huge, or this is an ocean of information. You're going to have to be patient. My main recommendation is to study. The best place to study is two places. So either docs.microsoft.com. This is the single source of truth for anything related to, for example, Azure, if you want to go and find out more. We also have Microsoft Learn. This is also a great service that you can leverage. This has a lot of different learning paths, modules, and the good thing about this is that it's sort of like a self-paced workshop where it gives you a sandbox environment sometimes, and you can go and, for example, create or follow those steps that are mentioned in those paths. So use these tools, use the videos that are published in our community channel. Let me see if I have a link here. I'm going to see if I can paste a comment here. No, I can't. How can I paste a comment in here?
Sir, you can just paste it in the private chat.
Yeah. So let me just paste it here. And there you go. We have a community of our trainers who are basically do these kind of videos, short videos like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes around Azure services. Definitely check those out. We have Channel 9, we have Azure Fridays, we have gazillions of different types of learning resources for you to get started. Obviously, if your organization is part of the Enterprise Skilling Initiative or ESI, you can also leverage by our instructor delivered courses, where, for example, one of my colleagues will run you through a series of services in a span of like 4 or 5 days, and you get to benefit from that, and you can go and sit the exam and get the certification. So that's my advice to you as someone who's just getting started. All right, thank you so much, folks. Thank you for having me. If there is more questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll wrap up and we'll leave you to it.
Yes, so I guess there are no more questions at the chat box, so we can just wrap up. And thank you for being our speaker. It's our extreme pleasure to have you with us, sir. And we are looking forward to see you in some more sessions.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
And we'll see you later.
Yes, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye.